The rain was falling hard that night, each drop hitting the roof like tiny stones. Eli sat near the small fireplace, reading an old paper book, while his father worked on fixing a broken lamp outside. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine. It was the kind of night when no one expected visitors, and everyone stayed indoors. But then there was a sound, a deep, heavy boom, followed by a strange hum. It was not thunder, and it was not the wind. Eli's head snapped up, eyes wide, and his father froze in place, listening. The sound came again, fainter this time. But from the direction of the forest, Eli stood up slowly. "Dad, did you hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His father nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Get your coat, son," he said quietly. "We're going to see what that was." They stepped out into the rain, the cold instantly soaking through their clothes. The night sky was dark, but in the distance, Eli could see a faint glow between the trees. It flickered and pulsed, not like fire, not like anything he had seen before. They walked quickly, the mud pulling at their boots, the wind pushing against them. The closer they got, the stronger the strange hum became, and then, through the sheets of rain, they saw a small metallic pod lying in a crater of steaming earth. The metal was dented and scorched, and faint blue lights ran along its sides. Eli's father moved closer, hand ready on the old pistol he always carried. Something inside the pod shifted, a shadow moving behind the cracked glass. Eli held his breath as the hatch opened with a slow hiss. A small figure stumbled out, collapsing into the mud. It was a girl, or at least she looked like one. Her skin had a faint shimmer to it, and markings like silver vines ran along her arms, glowing faintly in the dark. Her eyes, large and bright, darted around like a trapped animal's. She was breathing hard, her body shaking, and she wore torn clothes made of some strange fabric. Eli's father knelt beside her, checking if she was hurt. The girl flinched away, speaking in a language neither of them understood. Her voice was soft, trembling, filled with fear. Eli crouched beside her, trying to look less threatening. "It's okay," he said gently, though he knew she couldn't understand. Suddenly, in the distance, there was another sound, the sharp whine of engines. Eli looked up to see faint lights moving through the forest, not far away. His father's face hardened. "They're searching," he said. "If they find her, she's gone." Eli didn't understand what he meant, but the urgency in his father's voice made his heart race. Without another word, his father scooped the girl up, cradling her carefully, and motioned for Eli to follow. They hurried back through the rain, avoiding the main path, cutting through thick brush and tall grass every few moments. Eli glanced over his shoulder. Certain they were being followed, the girl clung weakly to his father, her glowing eyes never leaving Eli. They reached their small farmhouse and rushed her inside. Closing the door behind them, Eli fetched a blanket. Wrapping it around her trembling form, she sat on the floor near the fire, staring at the flames like she had never seen them before. His father poured a cup of warm water and handed it to her. She took it slowly, her hands shaking, and whispered a single word in broken human speech: "Please." The way she said it made Eli's chest tighten. It wasn't just a request, it was a cry for help. Eli's father exchanged a look. With him, one that said more than words could. This girl was in danger, and they had just made a choice to hide her, no matter the cost, outside. The distant sound of engines faded into the storm, but both Eli and his father knew they would return. For now, they stayed silent. The only sounds, the crackle of the fire and the girl's quiet, uneven breathing. Eli didn't know who she was, or why she had fallen from the sky. All he knew was that she had no one else, and that somehow, tonight, she had become their responsibility. The rain continued to fall, but inside that small home, a silent promise was made. they would protect her for as long as it took. The morning after the storm was quiet. But Eli could feel something in the air. It wasn't just the cold or the damp smell of wet grass. It was the feeling that trouble was coming. He stepped outside to fetch water from the well, and for a moment the world seemed still. Then he saw them. Dark shapes moving at the far edge of the field, uniformed men in armored vests walking in a line, scanning the ground with hand devices, government patrols. Eli's stomach tightened. They were coming closer, and they weren't here for a friendly visit. Inside, Sierra, the alien girl, was awake. Sitting on the floor with the blanket still around her shoulders, her large eyes followed every movement Eli made. She had eaten only a few pieces of bread the night before. As if unsure she was allowed to take more, Eli's father entered the room, his face pale but calm. "They're here," he said simply. Sierra's head tilted, not understanding the words, but she sensed the change in the air. Her hands tightened. Around the blanket, her breathing quickened. Eli's father motioned for her to stay quiet. Then he moved toward the door. 2 sharp knocks came before he could reach it. Eli's heart pounded when the door opened. A patrol captain stood there, tall and cold-eyed, behind him. 2 soldiers scanned the area with small, hovering drones. "Morning," the captain said. In a flat voice, "We're looking for a fugitive female." Small, possibly injured, he pulled out a holoprojector and tapped it. A blurry image appeared, showing Sierra's face, distorted but still recognizable. Eli glanced at his father. Praying he could hide his fear, his father kept his voice steady. "Haven't seen anyone?" he said. "We were home all night." The captain studied him for a moment too long. Finally, he nodded, but his eyes roamed past him. "Into the house. We may return later," he said, and with that, he walked away. But Eli knew this wasn't over. When the patrol left, his father shut the door and turned to Eli. "We have to move her," he said. "If they come back, they'll search the whole place." Sierra was watching them both, her eyes darting between their faces. Eli crouched next to her and spoke slowly, pointing toward the back of the house. "We go," he said, making a walking motion with his fingers. She hesitated, but when his father brought out an old satchel and started packing food, she seemed to understand. They moved quickly, slipping out through a small door in the barn that led to the woods. The forest was wet and quiet, but every sound, every snapping twig made Eli's heart race. After an hour of walking, they reached an old path hidden under fallen leaves. It led to a place Eli had only been once before, a hunting cabin deep in the woods. No one used it anymore, and it was far from the main road. Inside, it smelled of dust and wood. Eli's father checked the windows. Making sure no one could see inside, Sierra sat near the cold fireplace, watching them with tired eyes. Finally, she spoke, not in her language, but in broken human words. "Bad men," she said, pointing back toward the way they came. Eli nodded, surprised she understood more than they thought. "Yes," he said. "Bad men." For the next few days, they kept hidden. Eli's father went back to the farmhouse only once, to make sure nothing looked suspicious. Eli stayed with Sierra, bringing her food from the supplies they had. Slowly, she began to relax. She even smiled once when Eli tried to teach her the word fire while lighting the cabin hearth. But their peace didn't last. One morning, Eli woke to the sound of a faint hum outside. He crept to the window and saw a small metal drone floating just above the tree line, scanning the area. It was moving slowly, searching. His stomach dropped. They'd been found, or at least, someone was getting close. Eli's father grabbed their bags. "We leave now," he said firmly. They slipped out the back. Moving deeper into the forest, Sarah kept up, though her steps were small and careful. The hum of the drone grew distant. But Eli couldn't shake the feeling that more would come. Somewhere, someone had told the patrols where to look. It meant only one thing. Someone in their village had betrayed them. As they pushed through the undergrowth, Eli's father glanced back and said quietly, "This isn't just about hiding anymore. They're hunting her." And for the first time, Eli understood. They weren't just protecting a stranger, they were protecting family. The forest became their world. Days turned into nights, and nights turned into days, with no real sense of time. Eli, his father, and Sarah moved from one hidden place to another, never staying too long. They found an abandoned cabin far deeper in the woods than the last one, its roof sagging but still solid. Here, for a short while, they could rest. Eli's father made a small fire in the stone hearth, the smoke curling up through a crooked chimney. Sarah sat close to the flames, her hands stretched out toward the warmth. Her glowing silver markings shimmered faintly in the firelight. She didn't speak much, but her eyes followed Eli wherever he went, like she was trying to understand him. Piece by piece, the first few days, she barely ate. Eli would hand her bread or dried meat, and she would take only small bites, as if afraid it might be taken away. But slowly, she began to accept more. One morning, Eli placed an apple in her hands. She studied it carefully, turning it over like it was something rare and precious. Then she took a bite, and for the first time since they found her, a small smile touched her lips. It wasn't much, but to Eli, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Eli's father tried teaching her a few human words, speaking slowly and pointing to objects. "Fire," he said. Pointing to the flames, Sarah hesitated, then repeated softly, "Fire." Eli grinned, clapping once, and she tilted her head like she didn't understand why he was happy. They taught her water, bread, and safe. Safe was the one she repeated the most, as if testing the weight of the word. Sometimes she would glance at Eli or his father and whisper it under her breath. It was as if she was reminding herself. It was true. At night, when the forest was quiet, Sarah sometimes told them fragments of her story. Her human words were broken, mixed with sounds they didn't understand. But Eli pieced together enough to know she came from a star system far away. Her people were peaceful, living in floating cities above oceans. Then, soldiers came, not human, and took many away. She was taken as a child and never saw her home again. She didn't know why she had been brought to this planet. Only that she escaped during a transport, the fear in her voice when she spoke. Of the soldiers was something Eli would never forget. One afternoon, Eli left the cabin to check the traps his father had set. The air was crisp, and sunlight broke through the trees in thin golden lines. When he returned, he found Sarah trying to fix the broken leg of a wooden chair with a piece of string. She looked up, startled, and dropped the string, as if afraid she'd done something wrong. Eli shook his head and smiled. "It's okay," he said, handing her a small wildflower he had picked. Her eyes widened, and she took it carefully, holding it like it was fragile glass. Then she tucked it into her hair. It was such a small thing, but it made her look different, less like someone running for her life, and more like a girl who could belong here. But danger was never far away. That night, as they sat by the fire, a faint light flickered between the trees outside. Eli's father rose immediately, peering through a narrow gap in the window boards. A scout drone hovered just beyond the clearing, its sensors glowing red. It moved slowly, scanning the area. Sarah's eyes widened in panic, and she pressed herself against the wall, whispering in her own language. Eli's father motioned for them to stay quiet, his hand on the pistol at his side. After a long moment, the drone drifted away into the trees, its hum fading, but the silence it left behind was heavy. Eli knew it was only a matter of time before they sent more. Later that night, as they prepared to sleep, Sarah moved closer to Eli. She tugged gently at his sleeve and whispered, "Safe with you." The words were quiet, but they wrapped around his heart like a promise. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did, from that moment. Protecting her wasn't just something his father had decided. It was something Eli chose. For himself, whatever came, whatever they had to face, she would not be alone again. The morning after the drone sighting was tense. Eli's father barely spoke as he packed supplies into 2 worn satchels. Sierra sat by the fire, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes flicking between father and son. She could tell something was wrong even if she didn't understand every word. Eli tried to keep things calm, but inside, his stomach felt heavy. He knew his father's silence meant he was thinking about something serious. When the satchels were ready, Eli's father finally spoke. "We can't stay here much longer," he said, his voice low and steady. "They're searching this forest piece by piece, and if we wait, they'll find us." Eli glanced at Sierra, who was watching intently. "What do we do?" Eli asked. His father looked at the floor for a moment before answering. "We get her off this planet." The words hit Eli like a sudden gust of wind. Off the planet. That wasn't something you just did. Their world was heavily monitored. Ships didn't just come and go without clearance, and even if they found a ship, the price for passage would be impossible. "How?" Eli asked, his voice sharp. His father sighed. "I know someone. An old friend used to smuggle goods past checkpoints. Maybe still does." Sierra didn't understand the details. Okay, she caught the tone. She shook her head quickly, her voice trembling. "No." "Danger you?" "No." She didn't want them risking themselves for her. Eli crouched in front of her. "Your family now," he said slowly, pointing to his chest, then to his father, then to her. "We protect family." Her eyes softened, but the fear in them didn't disappear. Eli's father said they'd need to travel at night to avoid patrols. It would take 2 days to reach the nearest spaceport, hidden on the edge of a mining settlement, if his old contact still lived there. Maybe, just maybe, they could get a ride out. That evening, they left the cabin behind. The forest was darker than usual, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. Every step crunched on fallen leaves, and each sound felt too loud. Eli walked beside Sierra, keeping an eye on her in case she stumbled. His father led the way, always checking the shadows, always listening. Once they heard distant engines, and all 3 of them pressed against the wet ground until the sound faded. The first night passed without trouble. By morning, they reached the rocky hills that marked the halfway point to the settlement. They found shelter in a shallow cave, hidden by thick bushes. "Here." Sierra finally spoke again. She told Eli in broken words that her people believed in life debts. "If someone saved your life, you gave your own in return." Eli shook his head. "You don't owe us," he said, but she only replied softly, "Forever," like it was something she had already decided. The second night was worse. Rain began to fall again, and the path became slippery and slow. They had to move carefully to avoid leaving tracks. Near midnight, while crossing a narrow ridge, a beam of light cut through the darkness below. Voices followed, sharp, commanding, moving closer. Eli's father pulled them down behind a pile of rocks, motioning for silence. 3 soldiers passed below, scanning the slope with flashlights. One of them stopped, shining his beam upward. For a heartbeat, Eli thought they'd been seen. But a distant shout from another patrol called them away. They disappeared into the trees, their lights fading like fireflies. When they finally reached the outskirts of the mining settlement, it was nearly dawn. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and metal. Tall fences surrounded the dusty streets, and heavy trucks rumbled past. Eli's father led them through the back alleys, avoiding the main roads. They reached a dimly lit building tucked behind a row of storage sheds. "This is it," his father said, inside. The smell of old fuel and rust filled the air. An older man sat behind a desk cluttered with tools and half-repaired devices. His eyes widened when he saw Eli's father. "Well, I'll be damned, the man said, standing. Didn't think I'd see you again? They talked quietly. Away from Sarah, Eli couldn't hear every word. But he caught fragments. Passage, danger, price. When his father returned, his expression was grim. He'll do it, he said. But only if we're ready to leave tonight. Sarah's gaze flickered between them, sensing the tension, but before Eli could reassure her, the older man stepped forward. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes Eli didn't like. It was too sharp, too calculating, and in that moment, Eli had the sinking feeling that trusting him might be a mistake. Night fell quickly over the mining settlement. The streets grew quiet, with only the hum of distant machinery breaking the silence. Eli, his father, and Sarah waited in the old man's workshop, the air thick with the smell of oil and dust. The smuggler, whose name was Karen, busied himself with papers and data pads. Muttering about routes and timing, Eli sat close to Sarah, keeping his voice low when he spoke to her. She seemed tense, her glowing markings dim, her eyes darting to every shadow in the room. His father tried to hide his worry, but Eli could see the tightness in his jaw. Finally, Karen looked up. "We move now," he said, grabbing a heavy coat from the wall. "No more waiting. My contact. We'll have the ship prepped by the time we get there." They followed him through narrow alleys lit only by flickering lamps. The settlement seemed to sleep, but Eli couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were watching. They reached the edge of the freight yard where stacked cargo containers rose like silent walls. Between them, narrow paths led deeper toward the docks. Karen motioned for them to keep close and stay quiet as they walked. Sarah's hand brushed Eli's arm. He glanced at her and saw the worry in her face. Something was wrong. He could feel it too. Karen's steps were too quick, too purposeful, like he was leading them somewhere he already knew. His father must have noticed as well, because he suddenly slowed. "Where's the ship, Karen?" he asked in a low voice. "Not far," Karen replied without looking back, "just ahead." But his tone felt rehearsed. They turned a corner, and Eli's breath caught. A small group of armed soldiers stood waiting, their rifles already raised. The red beam of a targeting scope flickered across Eli's father's chest. Sarah froze, eyes wide, her breath quick and shallow. Karen stepped aside, his hands raised as if to show he wasn't a threat. "I told you they'd be here," he said to the soldiers, his voice smooth. One of the soldiers tossed a small bag of credits to him, payment for betrayal. Eli's father stepped in front of Sarah. "Tay," his voice cold. "You just signed her death sentence." Karen shrugged. "Better her than me." Before Eli could react, two soldiers grabbed him from behind. Forcing him to the ground, another soldier seized Sarah by the arm. Ignoring her frightened cry, his father fought back, knocking one soldier away before being struck hard across the face with a rifle butt. Eli struggled, but a blow to his head sent him spiraling into darkness. When he woke, his head was pounding. He was lying on a cold floor inside a dim storage room. His father was beside him, blood on his temple, but still conscious. Sarah was gone. Eli sat up quickly, panic flooding through him. They took her. His father said grimly, "We don't have much time." He explained that he'd overheard the soldiers saying she was being held in the upper level of the compound. They planned to put her on a transport ship at dawn, once she was off-world. They'd never find her again. Eli clenched his fists. They couldn't let it happen. His father pulled a small lockpick from his boot, a tool he'd carried since his days working in the mines within minutes. The storage door clicked open. They slipped into the dark corridors of the compound. Moving quickly but quietly, the air was thick with the smell of fuel and hot metal. Somewhere above, heavy boots clanged against grated floors. Every sound seemed to echo. They found a stairwell and began to climb, halfway up. Voices drifted down to guards talking about the alien girl and the bounty. Eli's father motioned for silence, then pressed them against the wall. Until the guards passed, at the top of the stairs, they reached a locked metal door. Through the small reinforced window, Eli saw Sira. She was sitting on a bench inside. Her hands bound, her head down. The sight made his chest ache. His father picked the lock as quickly as he could. When the door swung open, Sira looked up in disbelief. "Safe," she whispered, as if she couldn't believe it was really them. Eli moved to untie her, but a shout echoed from down the hall. They'd been seen. The heavy pounding of boots filled the corridor as armed soldiers charged toward them. Eli's father grabbed Sira's hand and pulled her into the hall. "Run!" he shouted. They sprinted toward the nearest exit. The sound of gunfire chasing them. Eli's heart pounded in his ears as they dodged down side passages. Leaping over scattered crates, somewhere behind them, a voice barked an order. "Don't let them reach the docks." But that was exactly where they were heading. Toward the smuggler's stolen ship. If it was still there, if they could just reach it, they might still have a chance. The docks were alive with noise and light. Cargo. Loaders rumbled across the platform, their metal arms lifting heavy crates into waiting freighters. Searchlights swept the yard, cutting through the mist that rolled in from the cooling vents. Eli, his father, and Sira burst from the shadows of the compound wall. Running low and fast, behind them, shouts rose as soldiers poured out in pursuit. The echo of boots on steel grew louder with every second. There. His father pointed toward a small cargo ship at the far end of the docks. Its hull was dented, paint peeling, but its engines glowed faintly, ready for launch. It was the smuggler's ship, the one Karen had promised before his betrayal. Now it was their only hope. They darted between stacks of containers. Keeping to the blind spots of the searchlights, Sira clung to Eli's sleeve. Her breathing quick and sharp. Her glowing markings pulsed with her racing heartbeat. A soldier spotted them from the catwalk above and opened fire. The blast struck a crate beside them, showering sparks and debris. Eli's father returned fire with his old pistol, forcing the soldier to duck. "Keep moving," he yelled. They ran harder, weaving between obstacles as more shots rang out. Eli could feel the heat of blaster bolts passing far too close. Every step felt like it could be his last. They were halfway to the ship when a squad blocked their path. 8 soldiers in heavy armor advanced, weapons ready. The leader stepped forward, his voice carrying over the noise. "Hand over the fugitive, and maybe you'll live." Eli's father stepped in front of Sarah. His eyes hard. "She's not a fugitive," he said coldly. "She's family." The soldiers didn't hesitate. They opened fire. Eli dove behind a stack of barrels, pulling Sarah down with him. Blaster bolts burned through the air, striking metal and sending showers of sparks around them. His father moved with practiced precision, firing back in short bursts. One soldier fell, another staggered and dropped his weapon. But there were too many. Eli spotted a small control panel nearby, a crane system for lifting containers. Without thinking, he scrambled toward it. Bullets and energy bolts hissed past as he reached the controls. He yanked a lever, and the crane swung a massive crate down into the squad, scattering them like insects. "Go!" his father shouted. They sprinted for the ship, the dock shaking beneath them as more fire erupted behind. Sira stumbled once, but Eli caught her and pushed her forward. The ship's loading ramp was down, its interior dim and waiting. They charged up the ramp just as 2 soldiers appeared from the side. Eli's father turned and met them head-on, slamming one into the wall and disarming the other. He grabbed the fallen rifle and ran inside, sealing the ramp shut. The cockpit was cramped, filled with blinking lights and old wiring. Eli's father jumped into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. Eli strapped Sira into the co-pilot's chair, making sure the belts were tight. Outside, alarms blared. As more troops swarmed the dock, The ship's engines roared to life, vibrating through the floor. "Hold on," his father called. The freighter lifted from the platform. Tilting sharply as it rose, a blast from below grazed the hull, sending warning lights flashing across the dashboard. Eli looked through the viewport to see two sleek fighter craft rising. "To intercept them, they're not letting us go," he said through clenched teeth. His father didn't answer. He simply pushed the throttle to maximum. The stars stretched into streaks as they shot forward, the fighters closing in. The chase was brutal. Laser fire lit up the darkness as the fighters took turns making attack runs. Eli's father rolled the ship hard to the left, dodging one barrage. But taking a hit to the rear shields, panels sparked, and the cabin filled with the smell of burning circuits. Sierra gripped Eli's arm, her eyes wide but steady. She whispered something in her language. The tone calm despite the chaos. Eli didn't understand the words. "Okay," but he understood the meaning. Trust. They dived toward a dense asteroid field, the jagged rocks spinning slowly in the void. "It's our only chance," his father said. Guiding the freighter between two massive stones, the fighters followed. But their speed became a disadvantage. One clipped a rock and spiraled out of control, disappearing in a burst of light. The other kept coming, weaving through the asteroids. Eli's father threaded their ship through tighter and tighter gaps. Finally, a tumbling boulder smashed into the remaining fighter. Sending it spinning away, silence fell, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. They were alive. Eli looked at Sarah. She was breathing hard, but she was smiling for the first time since they'd met. His father leaned back in the seat. "Exhausted but unbroken. We're not safe yet," he said quietly. "But we're free for now." And in that moment, Eli knew one thing for certain. No matter where they went next, they'd never stop fighting to protect her. The asteroid field slowly faded behind them. The stars ahead were calm, distant, and untouched by the chaos they had just escaped inside the ship. The air still smelled faintly of smoke and hot metal. Eli leaned back in his seat, feeling the pounding of his own heartbeat began to slow. Beside him, Sierra sat quietly, her glowing markings soft and steady now. Her eyes, once full of fear, watched the stars as if she had never seen them like this before. His father adjusted the controls, guiding the freighter into the deep black of space. "We need a place. They won't look for us," he said, his voice low, somewhere far from their patrol routes. Eli thought for a moment, then remembered a story his father once told about a hidden colony on the edge of known space. A place where miners and traders went when they wanted to disappear. His father gave a small nod when Eli mentioned it. "That could work," he said. If it's still there for the next few hours, they drifted quietly through the void. Eli checked the supplies, finding enough food and water for a few days at most. The ship's systems were old and unreliable, and every so often, a warning light would flicker on. Still, it was freedom, and after everything they had faced, that felt like the most precious thing in the universe. Sierra began to talk more as the hours passed. Her words were broken, but clear enough to understand. She told them about her home, the floating cities, the crystal seas, the way the stars reflected off the water at night. Eli listened, picturing it in his mind. It sounded like a dream. But her voice would falter whenever she spoke about the day the soldiers came. Eli could see the pain in her eyes, and he wanted to take it away. When she grew quiet, Eli's father spoke. "You don't have to tell us more," he said gently. "What matters now is you're safe." Sierra looked between them for a long moment, then said one word. "Family." She touched her chest, then pointed to Eli, then to his father. Her meaning was clear. Eli felt a warmth in his chest he couldn't explain. They hadn't just saved her, she had claimed them as her own. It took almost a full day to reach the coordinates of the hidden colony. From a distance, it looked like a scattering of lights against the darkness, tucked into the shadow of a massive asteroid. Old freighters and transport ships floated nearby, some clearly patched together from scraps. It wasn't much to look at, but it was safe. As they approached, a scratchy voice crackled over the comm. "Identify yourselves," his father replied simply. "Just a ship looking for quiet space." After a pause, the voice said, "Dock at Bay 3. They landed without trouble. Inside, the colony was dim and crowded, the air filled with the smell of metal, oil, and cooking food. People of all kinds moved through the narrow corridors. Miners, traders, and others who didn't want to be found. No one asked questions. It was exactly what they needed. They found a small living space at the edge of the colony. It's barely big enough for the three of them, but it had a door that locked and a window that showed the stars. To Eli, it felt like a fortress. In the days that followed, they began to build a new routine. His father found work helping repair old ships. Eli spent time in the market, trading for food and supplies. Syrah slowly learned more human words, sometimes surprising them by speaking full sentences. She began to laugh, a sound they had never heard from her before, when Eli tried to teach her some old Earth card games. Bit by bit, the shadows in her eyes began to fade. One evening, they sat together in the small room, eating a simple meal through the window. The stars shone brighter than usual. Syrah set down her cup and looked at them both. "You protect me," she said slowly. "I protect you." It was more than just words, it was a vow. Eli smiled and reached across the table to squeeze her hand. His father nodded in agreement. "We protect each other," he said. No matter what, that night, Eli lay awake for a long time. He thought about the first night they met her. The rain, the fear, the way she had whispered please. So much had changed since then. She was no longer a stranger. No longer a fugitive they had to hide. She was their family. And in that quiet, watching the stars drift by, Eli made his own silent promise. No matter where they went or what came after, he and his father would stand by her side forever.